بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
So in 1974, in 1474, on the island of Lesbos, which is modern day Greece today, Aruj was born. At that time, that particular island was controlled by the Turkish Empire. Now, Aruj Reis was his name. Aruj Reis was his name. He was born. His father actually belonged to the Suleiman, the Magnificent, Suleiman al-Qanuni. He belonged to an elite force, i.e., you need another one? Okay. So his father belonged to an elite task force, i.e., he was like, the 007 force for the Queen. Like he belonged to this MI7, a very, very, secretive force, and they did these covert missions all across the Mediterranean. And his father married somebody by the name of Katrina. She was an Orthodox Christian. There's no accounts of whether she converted to Islam or not. We don't know if she ever became a Muslim. Now, this was 1474 on Lesbos. Aruj Reis was born. And then 4 years after that, 1478, there was another person, one of Aruj's younger brother by the name of Khizr, was born. Now, I will tell you why we're mentioning both the brothers. You will understand the story. Now, from 1480 to 1500, what happened was, because his father Yaqub belonged to an elite task force and they want lots of victories, the Sultan at that time gave them a specific, on the island of Lesbos, a huge piece of land. So they said, what do we do? Because in between battles, we have to make our earning. So they became known as famous potters of that time. So his father and the four brothers, they got known in the Mediterranean Sea at that time as a family that was exporting. They were making pottery. You know what pottery is? Who knows what pottery is? You know what pottery is? No. So clay, pots that are made out of clay, right? Pots that are made out of clay. You can look up, when you go home, look up YouTube, like pottery or clay pots. You'll understand what that is, right? So they were making those with their hands. Till this day, pottery is made through hands. Nobody, you don't have machine. I think you might have some machinery now, but like most of it is still done by hand. So they were exporting that between 1480 to 1500. They were exporting that pottery across, and they became major players in that industry. Now, because he was traveling to Italy, he was traveling to France, he was living on the island that spoke predominantly Greek at that time. He was interacting with a lot of Muslims from the Arab land, and he was part of the Turkish Empire. Aruj Reis that was his name. Aruj Reis was actually a polyglot. What does a polyglot mean? Somebody who speaks 5 or more languages. Okay? A polyglot is a person who speaks 5 or more languages. So, sorry? You speak 5 languages? MashaAllah. Is sleep talking one of them? Because a lot of my kids do that too, right? So, Italian, Spanish. You guys write this down. What were the languages he spoke? He spoke Italian, he spoke Spanish, he spoke French, Greek, Arabic, and Turkish. So a total of 6. So anybody who speaks 5 or more languages, that person is called a polyglot. So he was a polyglot. And what happens around 1500, he is sailing with his pottery and his brothers, and they're sailing to an island, and they come across one of the most fierce crusader army known as the Knights Hospitallers, or they were also called the Knights of St. John. And they run into Baba Aruj, or Aruj at that time. I'll tell you why his name became Baba Aruj. Aruj Reis, they run into him, they capture him, and they capture him around Tripoli, and they take him all the way to the castle of Bodrum, which is found on the island of Rhodes. Okay? Now I wish there was Google Earth here and you could see where all of these things were, but just, really far from Tripoli. Now, what happens is he stays there in that island, and he stays in that castle, not castle, the fort it's actually castle, and he was actually in the dungeon of the castle. So he stays there for 3 years, and he understands. He's a very smart person. He figures out escape plan. And what he does is, on the middle of one of the nights, he recognizes that on a particular night, the sailors and everybody, they get drunk. And the guard is the lowest at that time. Everybody gets drunk. So on one of those nights, he finds an opportunity. He escapes from the prison. He jumps on a ship. Now, did we talk about galleys before? We talked about galleys, right? Where they had those men in the bottom floor and they would oar, right? So those galleys usually would have sometimes 100 to 150 oars. You would have the 100 or 50 and 50 oars necessary for the movement of the ship, and you would have those excess, another 50, 25 if they needed extra boost so people could come down and get the ship going, with usually 3 to 4 sails on that galley. Now, Aruj gets onto the boat and finds the entire ship crew is drunk. So he starts tossing them out one by one because they're all drunk. So he fights and tosses them over, and then he throws all the oars out because it's going to slow him down when he's sailing, and he entirely sails the entire ship all by himself and arrives at Antalya, which is in Turkey. Now, when he arrives in Antalya in 1503, he does the escape. He escapes in 1503. He sailed, and usually a ship like that required around 200 men to control that ship. So you can imagine the effort that he had to go through in sailing that ship. But more importantly, because in the early time from 1480 to 1500, he spent 20 years sailing back and forth in the sea. He understood, and he became the master of how to sail, understood the sea waves, the currents, because he was doing that for his living, right? So what do we learn here, right? Sometimes you may do things, right, as kids, as you grow older, but sometimes you think it's just a repetitive task. But 20 years later, you will learn that the skill that you learned from there is going to be beneficial for you, right, later down the road, right? So what happens here is he escapes and he comes to Antalya, and when he arrives at Antalya, there's the nephew. There's ikhtilaf whether this was a nephew or a relative. Bottom line, he was a very close relative to Sultan at that time. His name was Shahzada Kurkut. Shahzada Kurkut, he sees the quality in Aruj, and he says, a person like you should not be just, selling pottery. You should be the leader of the naval army for the Ottomans. So he gives him 24 galleys. So if average galley had 200 men times 24, what's that? How many men is he controlling? So what is 2 times 24? What is 2 times 24? Yeah? 48. So how many men did he have? 4,800 men that he controlled. And now he has the first naval Muslim army and 24 ships or galleys and around 4,800 men, 4,800 to 5,000 men that he is now under command. His brother also joins him, Aruj and Hayreddin. Aruj and Hayreddin. Hayreddin, his other name was Khizr, but later on he was called Hayreddin. So the two brothers, Aruj and Hayreddin, they join one another, and now they go to Tunisia. And in Tunisia, there is this small place called Jerba. Till this day, unfortunately today, Jerba is known for its vibrant nightlife. A lot of the Khaliji, a lot of the Gulf Arab state rich people go there for haram stuff. As a matter of fact, when I was researching, I found that a lot of the youth, the Tunisian youth that live there, they're dancing with break dancing and doing all of these things right next to the statue of Baba Aruj, and they have absolutely no idea who this Barbarossa, and they're so disconnected from their history. Like that city itself, the youth of that city do not know the significance of that city. Right, then we can't blame youth over here, right? Like they're living and they're seeing signs and monuments, yet they're not connected. So in 1503 he arrives and he makes his first naval base, Jerba. 1504 he recognizes that if I want to control the Mediterranean, I cannot have just one base. I need a secondary base, and I need to be able to move from this base to this base, and then this way I can control a bigger portion of the Mediterranean. So he goes to a person by that time, a small country that, in Tunisia, run by a person by the name of Abu Abdullah Muhammad al-Hamisi, and he says, listen, I want to use the port that you have, and that port was called La Golata. I want to use that port, and in return, I will give you 1/3 of whatever I make. So there's a deal, and they strike a deal, and they go on. And now he is fully established to take on the mission, right? What is the mission? The mission is between 1504 and 1510. He was transporting Muslims and Christians and Jews that were not Catholic, Christians that were not Catholic, Jews and Muslims that were being persecuted in Spain at the hands of the Spanish Inquisitions. So he spent the next 6 years or 7 years, going up and down, and saving all, so many Muslims and Jews. And that is one of the reasons why Morocco is one of the, and that, area in Tunisia, you will find people who speak fluent Arabic and they're Jews. As a matter of fact, true story, what happened with me was when I used to work at Eglinton and Young during my university years at a co-op job. And there's a pizza shop there at Eglinton and Young. That pizza shop is run by a Moroccan...
Did you say that again?
See, technology can't hear me. She's like, what? Are you talking about Jews? I'm listening now. So, so at that place at Eglinton and Young, there is a pizza shop that is run by a Moroccan Jew. And for me, it was really shocking because I started speaking Arabic to this person back then, and he's speaking Arabic to me, and I was like so surprised. And I'm like, the food's halal, and he's like, yeah, it's kosher. And I'm like, kosher? But you speaking Arabic to me? He's like, yeah, I'm a Jew from Morocco. And at that time, I didn't know. I was like, okay, that's weird. Like, you're a Jew from Morocco. I didn't know that, right? But till this day, there are Jews in that area, and they live there, right? And that was one of the reasons, because they were being persecuted in Spain, and then they would bring them down. Now, 1513, he attacks the city of Valencia. Baba Aruj attacks the city. I mean, I'm just giving you highlights. That whole thing is an entire battle. What happened and how he saved an entire thing. We don't have time for it. By the way, Barbarossa is really good because right now you have a TV series that is running. It's not even finished. It's season 1 on Barbarossa. It is 30 episodes of 2.5 hour long movies. It's running on a website called Historical Fun TV. Historical Fun, you have to subscribe for it, $10, and it has all of these Muslim history shows that have been Muslim historical figures that have been turned into TV shows. You have all of them there, right? And English subtitles, right? So it is running on Historical Fun, and so the kids can actually listen to this, and then they can go and watch. But you can imagine if there's so much information about his life that they built 5 seasons. So the production is 5 seasons long. We're in season 1. And each episode is 2.5 hours long, and there are 30 episodes. And I was like, oh my God, like, can you imagine how much information's there, right? Thanks to the reason that he actually documented a lot of it. Barbarossa. Oh, Historical Fun. You didn't find it? You find it? Yeah, it's yellow, right? Yeah, Historical Fun. Just go Historical Fun on Google. Yeah, if you want a free version but a lower quality, you can also go to Usman Online. Usman Online, it has a free version, but I don't like, it's 480. It's not, like if you're watching on TV, it really is not that much fun. Not that bad, actually, you can watch it, but like kids don't mind it. Right? Then what happens is in 1516, this is funny. There's a group of people in Algeria, right? They come to him and they say, listen, we are under an onslaught, and what is happening is the Spaniards and our ruler of ours, Abu Hamu Musa, they have actually joined hands, and they're trying to, they're really treating the Muslims bad. Can you come and save us? So the people ask Barbarossa to fight against their own ruler who has allied with the Spains in 1516. So he goes there helps the Muslims, and ends up taking the entire Algerian country. So he becomes the Sultan of Algeria, right? Subhanallah. Now, here is a really good lesson for all of us. The minute he becomes Sultan of Algeria, he actually started his ascent to power because he was the general for the Sultan and Shahzada Kurkut for the Ottoman Empire. So he could have easily said, you know what, I'm just going to wash my hands away. Now I've become Sultan of one of the biggest countries in the world, Algeria, plus I've got these 2 ports to my name. What else do I have to lose? I'm just going to disconnect myself from the Ottoman Empire. They should pay taxes to me because they're going to cross. But rather, he recognizes that the greater good was that Muslims remain united. So he declines from the title of being called Sultan, and he sends a message to Sultan Suleiman al-Qanuni at that time, and he tells him that I am gifting the country of Algeria to you. Right? And he's saying, I want this to be part of the Ottoman Empire. I have no intentions of being a sultan. I'm still going to serve you. And then in return, he appoints him as a governor for that state. But more importantly, giving away his sultanate and his sovereignty just because he recognizes that, this country, if it unites with the great Ottoman Empire at that time, then it is going to be a lot better for the Muslims, right? And a lot of times we could learn a lot, especially as adults and, in our societies in general. Now, so in the city of Tlemcen, which is modern-day Algeria right now, portions of Tunisia. There are 2 Tlemcen, so we don't know which Tlemcen we're talking about at that time because there's a Tlemcen in Algeria and there's a Tlemcen in Tunisia, but they're the same region. Aruj and his other brother Ishaq, he is being held hostage by the hands of Emperor Charles V, with Emperor Charles V and Sheikh Bou Muhammad, a Muslim and a Christian, unite, and they said, we need to get rid of Aruj. Aruj has become a big problem for us, and we need to get rid of Aruj and his brothers. There's a menace for us. We need to get rid of them. So they bring 10,000 Spanish soldiers, along with around 5,000 of the Muslims in that army combined. And they march and they go into the city of Tlemcen. Aruj and Ishaq, they are in a fortress wall with 1,500 Turkish soldiers and around 5,000 Moorish soldiers. These are soldiers, Jews and Muslims who he had saved from Andalus. So they are willing to support and stand and fight for him. And eventually, bottom line, there was a long battle that takes place. It takes 20 days for the battle. So imagine 20 days of constant onslaught by the 15,000 soldiers and then they were only around 6,200, or in another account 6,500. And finally they give in and he dies, Aruj. Now this fight takes place here, but you need to understand at the same time the context of what was taking place in Europe. So people were so scared of Baba Aruj and these Aruj brothers that in Europe, mothers would say to their children, if you do not go to bed, Baba Aruj is going to come from the sea and take you. And they were like, he was like a ghost for them. And many of the times people were afraid of his name. Children were afraid, because for them, anytime they would step foot on the sea, they would just think of, what if we cross path by the Aruj brothers? We're just gonna lose it, right? And it was fair game at that time because borders had not been drawn. We didn't know whose territory was what. Everybody was trying to claim sovereignty over the Mediterranean. So there were pirates that were fighting. There were people who were Aruj, Ottoman Empire. Everybody wanted control of the Mediterranean because all the goods would sail through that. So it was like literally a major trade route, and whoever controls it gets a lot of money. Now, when Aruj dies, they take his head, and his head travels all the way to Rome in Papals at that time. And then from there, a decree is given by the Vatican that his head is going to go to all major Catholic churches around Europe. And wherever the head would arrive, they would have a massive feast and to boost the morale of the crusaders and the people and the sailors. And that carried on happening for 2 years with his head because they were so afraid of this person. Now, while they were still celebrating, because they didn't have social media, they didn't know what was taking place, right? So while they were in their forms of celebration, what happens was something really interesting. His brother, that same year, his brother now, Hayreddin, takes over. And Hayreddin now becomes the actual Barbarossa. Right? So there was the first Barbarossa, Baba Aruj. Now, where did the name come from, Barbarossa? Because a lot of people confuse, like, well, his name is Aruj Reis. Why is he called Barbarossa? So when he was bringing those Andalusian, Moorish people from Andalus to Africa, to the northern African, countries, in Andalus, when somebody is respected, out of respect, they would call him Baba. Out of respect. Because they were influenced by the Catholic culture, right? So Baba is the Pope, like Baba. It's respectful, right? So his name was Aruj, and he was called Baba Aruj. Now, soon when he started traveling to Italy and these places, it was hard for them to pronounce Baba Aruj. So they saw his red beard. They saw his massive red beard that he had. And he because he was a mixed breed, so he had a reddish type of a more of a brunette type of a beard. So when he had that beard, the Italians and the Europeans, when they saw his beard, they said Aruj, which means a red bearded person. So they changed his name from Baba Aruj to Baba Aruj. Now, over the period of time in history, Baba Aruj turned into Baba Aruj, and then eventually they said. They say it's just easier to call him Barbarossa, just easier for their tongues. So they transformed that name into Barbarossa, and that's how the name formed from Aruj to Baba Aruj and all of that, right? That's just a side note. Now, what's really interesting is his brother takes over, Hayreddin Barbarossa, and recaptures Tlemcen, and Tlemcen now becomes back again at the state. It is controlled by the Muslims. Now, what's really interesting, this is a point for adults, but Aruj Reis, when he established his navy, he developed a system of succession planning. So those of you that have worked in companies, you know how much companies pay for succession planning today. As a matter of fact, in an article that was written in Forbes on March 15th, 2015, an article was written that the net cost for a Fortune 500 company, if they do not have a succession plan for a CEO, is close to $112 billion in lost net market value. So if they're not prepared, like whatever happens and the CEO dies or CEO is exited or CEO resigns, and they did not have a plan, the net loss for a Fortune 500 company in their market value, if that CEO had stayed for that 1 year, is equal to $112 billion. Right? This is on Forbes. So that tells you how important is succession. And oftentimes, those of you that have seen these things in companies, the minute the CEO resigns or he is terminated, you have board members that are flying over, you're having specialists and consultants being paid by an hour. It's just money-making game that you cannot imagine. And I used to work in a company before when I was in the Middle East, and when the new CEO came, he spent over $3 million in just doing assessments on his direct reports to develop a succession plan, saying that if I happen to leave one day, I want to make sure that the company is in good hands, and the people that are directly reporting to me are the people that actually are qualified to actually lead those departments. Right? So succession planning is a really big thing. And we learned this why? Because after Baba Aruj's death in 1797 until 1797, he dies in 1546, right? Not this one. He dies in 1520 or 1517. So when he dies at this time in the Tlemcen fall in 1517, till 1797, the Muslim naval forces dominated the Mediterranean. So whatever system he established lasted for 300 years. As a matter of fact, you can find, it's called the Treaty of Tripoli. This is a little bit of a tangent, but it's interesting. There's a treaty called the Treaty of Tripoli. You can look it up on Google. It was signed between the Ottoman Empire and the United States of America. And it's really interesting, in that treaty, the article number 12 on that treaty, it says, we, the United States of America, are not a Christian country, hence we are not at odds with you Muslims. It's so funny. Like, you read that treaty and they're openly declaring that, oh, the Christian, the French and the Italians and the Greek, they're all Christian countries. We are a secular country. So we would really hope that you would let us ride through the Mediterranean without charging us taxes. So when you read these documents, you get so amazed that, you know how history plays itself, right? Anyway, that was just a side note. It's not even in my notes, but since we talked about it, it came. So the next part, and I'm going to, this is the bigger one, right? So this is the biggest battle that takes place. I mean, he had around 38 battles. Okay, I talked about one of the talisman right now where he dies, Aruj, and then I'm going to talk about Hayreddin Barbarossa's biggest battle, which was called the Battle of Parveza. Okay, Preveze. You can actually look it up in Wikipedia. There's a very detailed article on the entire battle. It's really interesting to watch. So I'm going to lay it out for all of you, this particular battle. So what happens is, before the battle, in 1529, the Sultan, he appoints Hayreddin Barbarossa. Hayreddin Barbarossa, which is the brother of Aruj Reis Barbarossa, who passed away. He is now appointed as the leader of the army, and he has been given a massive fleet, you know, more than what he had, more than what Aruj Reis had. And the first command that is given to him by Sultan Suleiman al-Qanuni is in 1529. He says, you are going to drive up and down on the coast of Andalus, right, from Malacca all the way to Granada, all the way up and down in Valencia and all of these ports. You're going to drive, and you're going to sail, by the way. You're going to sail your boats that I give you, and you're going to do attacks and free Muslims and Jews from the Spanish Inquisitions. In that 1 year, that he was focused on that mission, he freed over 70,000 Muslims and Jews at the hands of the Spanish Inquisitions, right? The Spanish Inquisition is a lecture on its own, right? And those of you that want, you can read history about it. It's something, you know, it's one of the darkest sides of Western history that they don't want to talk about. I mean, the depictions of pictures that happens, you know, is just horrendous. The types of torture that you could not imagine that somebody who claims to be divine and close to God would torture human beings like that. So in 1536, now I'm coming back, and so the Battle of Parveza takes place in 1538, but I'm going to take you back 2 years and set you up on how the battle takes place. So in 1536, Barbarossa was called back to Istanbul, which was the capital, and there was intel that the Pope Paul III is forming something which was known as the Holy Alliance. And the Holy Alliance is supposed to be formed by 1537. Muslims had infiltrated in their ranks, so they had some intel. They come out, they actually say, they hear about this, and they bring Hayreddin Barbarossa to Istanbul, and they give him around 200 ships, 200 ships. And what really happens is, now and this 200 ships was a consequence of a battle that the Muslims won by another hero by the name of Turgut Reis, which we can cover later if we have some time. Turgut Reis wins a battle at the hands of the Naples at that time, and he wins around 200 galleys and ships in that battle, and that comes at the hands of the Muslims, and now he is in charge of this massive plan to dismantle this Holy Alliance. Now, this was the biggest Holy Alliance that took place at that time. Pope Paul III forms this alliance filled of 8 countries at that time: Republic of Genoa, Order of St. John's, which was a country at that time. It no longer exists. Portuguese Empire. Spain, which included two main areas, Naples and at that time Spain, today Sicily is part of Italy and Naples, but at that time it was all controlled by Spain. Then you have the Maltese Knights. Then you had the Republic of Venice, Venice at that time. It was huge. And the Papal State. All of these combined, they created a naval army, naval ship strength of 600 plus ships. How many ships? 600 plus ships. These included 162 galleys. What are galleys? You remember them? Yes, boats, and they have sails and rows. And around 140 sailing ships. And can you guess how many soldiers? Make a guess. Yeah. Just say a number. You have 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. 200? Yes. 20,000? A little bit more. Yeah. 60,000. Excellent. MashaAllah. So they had 60,000 soldiers, and their leader was by the name of Andrea Doria. Okay? That was the leader. The Muslims, they also decided that they're not going to fight. If they have formed an alliance, we have to form an alliance. So Turgut Reis, which was another hero of our times, and Turgut Reis and Barbarossa combined on 28th of September. They joined hands and they formed a fleet strength of 122 galleys and only 12,000 soldiers. So how many? You have 60,000 soldiers at the enemy's side, and you only have 12,000 soldiers with the Muslims. They have over 600 ships, all varying different types of ships. We have only 122 ships. Now, when they go and the battle is about to begin, something really interesting happens. The winds start blowing in the favor of the enemies. So their ships are sailing faster, and the Muslims have to figure out how to capture this winds, and they have to work harder, and it's harder for them to be in position, and now they have the advantage. So at that moment, this is just a one glimpse of what Turgut Reis did at that time, and Barbarossa. He said, gather all the soldiers that we have. How many soldiers did we have? Yes. 12,000. We had 12,000 soldiers. So we had 12,000 soldiers, and he sent a word to every single ship. How many ships did we have? 122 ships. 122 ships, all of them were told that each one of you are going to find a piece of paper or a piece of leather or something, and you're going to write on that piece of leather one good deed that you did only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inspired by the story of the three people that were stuck in the cave. And they made that dua, oh Allah, if I did this, then the stone moved. And then the next person made the dua and the stone moved. Then the next person made the dua and the stone opened. Okay? The door opened for them. Inspired by that, he actually tells them to write this and give those papers to your commanders. And then those commanders take that, and at that time, Baba Aruj, Barbarossa and Turgut Reis, they combined, they say that we're going to sail this, we're going to put all of these paper in the water, and we're going to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to change the direction of the winds because of all these good deeds that each one of them had committed to. And for some reason, his thought worked, and within a couple of hours, the winds completely turned around, and the Muslims, they got the advantage. Now, the battle started, and it is mentioned, he mentions himself that within, with sa'at, yani within few hours, he didn't mention, because they didn't have watches like that, perfect times. Within few hours, the wind started blowing in the favor of the Muslims, and the total battle lasted less than 5 hours, he mentions. He mentions that the entire battle took 5 hours. The Turks had sunk over 86 ships for the enemies. They had captured, burnt around 48 others, because the ships used to be made of wood, 48 others, and they captured 36 of the total ships. They had taken over 8,000 prisoners, and the Turks did not lose a single ship in that battle. A few of them suffered detrimental damages, but they didn't lose a ship. A total of only 400 people died from the Muslims, and around 800 were wounded. Suleiman al-Qanuni, because of what they did to the head of to the head of Barbarossa, he declared to the entire world at that time, the Ottoman Empire, he declared for them that we are going to do something which is called Takbirat al-Barroza, or Parveza, which was the place called, which means that the entire world is going to participate in this ritual. And in every mosque for the next 1 month, there are going to be special takbirat, which is Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah. These takbirat are documented in history by the name of Takbirat al-Barroza. It is mentioned that even in the books, history books that are found in Bombay around that time, they mentioned that they participated. Bombay was not part of the Turkish Empire at that time. They had a different empire, but they even participated in the Takbirat of Barroza at that time. The entire Muslim world, and that is how trending things used to happen back then. Now it takes 30 seconds and it's a trending hashtag, and everyone knows about it. But this is how the trend used to be set at that time. Then, alhamdulillah, things switched to the favor of the Muslims. The Muslims end up winning the battle. This battle till this day is the biggest naval battle that Muslims have ever participated in terms of the number of ships against another enemy. And this became a day where Andrea Doria and the rest of the world actually recognized that there's something weird about Muslims, where numbers do not add up when Muslims are when we're fighting Muslims. Because it always ends up happening that, we make an estimation and calculation, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is and will always be on the sides of the Muslims. Then, at that time, Hayreddin Barbarossa, the second one, he finally retreats. He goes back. Till this day, no new ship is launched in Turkey. For example, in 2020 or 2021, recently, Turkey just launched their submarines, their own submarines built in Turkey. And those submarines are named after a famous person by the name of Piri Rais. Piri Rais, who is going to be, I'm debating if I should do him, because he was the first person who actually drew the entire map of the world. And if you look at that map of the world that he drew in the current map without any satellite imaging, he was so accurate about it. So Piri Rais, they named a new submarine after, and every single new ship that is launched in Turkey, they do an honor guard as part of the Navy culture at the grave of, so they bring, whatever their ritual, and it takes place, and it says we're going to launch our entire honor guard from that grave of his. So there's a tomb over there, and they start that honor guard as part of a naval procession, and then they go to the sea, and then they launch the boats till this day, out of respect for this person, what he did, and he laid the foundation of the Turkish Navy. I think the Turkish Navy today is considered one of the top 10 navies in the world. You'll be surprised. I was actually surprised too. They have a very, very strong navy. And all of that, the roots of it was laid by the two brothers, Aruj Reis Barbarosa and Hayreddin Barbarossa. And he died in 1546, peacefully, while writing his own journals. Alhamdulillah.